Our infrastructure and natural resources can't keep up with growing demands. We need to be smarter. We need to care more. It's time to create smart infrastructure. We can because we connect energy systems, buildings, and industries to adapt and evolve the way we live and work for the good of the planet and the people. Creating environments that care. Smart infrastructure from Siemens.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the World City Summit 2021 webinars. I am your MC, Genevieve. Thank you for joining us at Smarter and Greener, Transforming Through Technology. In a few moments, I will introduce Mrs. Josephine Teo, Minister for Communications and Information, Minister in charge of Smart Nation and Cybersecurity, Singapore, to give a keynote speech. We will then welcome other speakers on our panel to share their views. This will be followed by the moderated discussion and Q&A for this session. During this event, you may select the audio channel to listen to simultaneous interpretation in Mandarin. Some of you have already submitted questions to our speakers in advance, but you can also use the Q&A function on our virtual platform to do so throughout the session. We also have a live audience poll, which you can participate in now through the virtual platform. We are very honored to have Mrs. Josephine Teo, Minister for Communications and Information, Minister in charge of Smart Nation and Cybersecurity, here with us to give the keynote address for this session. Minister Teo, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me, and congratulations to the Center for Livable Cities for once again organizing the World Cities Summit. The World Cities Summit has been running for 13 years. Its longevity is testament to the usefulness of us coming together to exchange insights and sharpen ideas on building better cities. There is much in common in the challenges we face and the aspirations we have. Yet no two cities are completely alike. The circumstances that shape us are different. In the spirit of mutual learning, I am pleased to launch a joint publication between CLC and Tianjin Eco-Cities Administrative Committee titled A Partnership for a Smart and Sustainable Future, the China-Singapore Tianjin Eco-City. The Tianjin Eco-City is second of 3 bilateral flagship projects Singapore has with China, all of which I've been privileged to have been part of. The project broke ground in 2008 and was designed to demonstrate how cities can be built with environmental sustainability as a top priority and how concepts can turn into reality. Its experience was documented and published in 2018 on the occasion of its 10th anniversary. It received many positive responses. To broaden its reach and benefit more interested parties, an adapted English edition is being launched today. I hope international readers will find this useful in learning more about Tianjin Eco-City and be inspired. Every now and then, it's useful to re-examine our ideas and assumptions of what makes a city smart. Over the past decade, one recurring theme has been the use of digital technology. How can they help us design, build, and run urban spaces more smartly? Some projects are fun to observe, and even if not particularly impactful, they do no harm. But really, smart digital technologies are those that help us solve real-life problems, overcome constraints, improve people's lives, and help businesses thrive. This is why conversations on smartness are invariably organized around themes like healthcare, facilities management, transport. As a result, smart cities are associated with smart health, smart buildings, smart transport. This makes sense. But for my sharing today, allow me to propose a different lens for seeing smart cities along 3 dimensions. First, resilience. A smart city should be able to respond and adapt fast to new challenges and unanticipated problems. Second, integration. A smart city should take an integrated approach to its use of resources and in managing its environmental footprint. Third, building for the future. A smart city never stops investing in infrastructure to enable new engines of growth and innovation. Let me elaborate. First, on resilience. Globalization, climate change, and tech disruption mean that a city is subject to forces that are more volatile and unpredictable than before. There is no more dramatic example of this than COVID-19, which took all of us by surprise. At the same time, many elements in a city cannot be changed so easily. It's not just the physical infrastructure, but also the economic structures, the patterns of living that have been built up over time. Digital solutions can therefore add a dimension of speed and responsiveness to the city and give it a level of agility to adapt and adjust. When COVID-19 hit Singapore's shores in early 2020, we faced the logistical challenge of having to distribute masks to everyone in Singapore. Masks were in short supply then globally. The priority was to ensure our healthcare workers had uninterrupted access and were adequately protected. This meant a limited supply for the public. How do we make sure the distribution is fair and timely? Can we have a system to repeat the distribution exercise when supplies are replenished? Our engineers took 4 days to develop an app called Supply Ally to track the nationwide mask distribution. This app allowed us to effectively orchestrate what would otherwise have been a messy logistical exercise. It assured the public that they would not be deprived of access. Since April last year, Supply Ally has facilitated the distribution of 4.4 million masks to the public. Another example is safe entry and trace together. We all recognize that time is of the essence in contact tracing. The sooner close contacts are identified and quarantined, the lower the number of second and subsequent generation transmission of the virus. The problem is that interviewing all COVID positive cases is a laborious process. People also do not remember precisely who they interacted with and for how long. With Safe Entry and Trace Together, we have supplemented careful interviewing with data. This has helped the Health Ministry bring the time between exposure and quarantine from more than 4 days to about 1.5 days or less. Without such tools, the virus would have spread farther and wider. As a government, we also experimented with new ways to communicate with and engage the public. To reach out to youths more effectively, we are trying out the use of gamification through our collaborations with social media platforms. For example, users on TikTok can challenge others to determine the best COVID slayer. The game also weaves in bite-sized vaccine-related facts to encourage users to get vaccinated. Of course, digital tools cannot address all issues. Ultimately, it is the determination and cooperation of the public that have allowed us to weather the storm and that will see us through the pandemic. But digital tools can help to disseminate information and counter fake news, deliver services with high assurance, and in the case of contact tracing, enable the public to collectively contribute to contact tracing. They can help make a city stronger in the face of a crisis. Second, integrated management of limited resources. Climate change is threatening the globe. Cities need to take climate action and manage resources sustainably, while still offering a high standard of living and good opportunities. This is why Singapore launched the Singapore Green Plan in February this year to advance our national agenda on sustainable development. Green technology has matured in various areas, such as in building management, solar generation, and vehicular electrification. Many cities, including Singapore, are making use of these advancements. The challenge would be to go beyond specific applications of technology to examine whether the smartness in resource optimization can be built in at a district or even city level. This is where digitalization and the judicious use of data can enable a new level of coordination and efficiency in planning, developing, and running the city. Take district cooling systems. By moving centralized cooling from the building to the district level, we can reap cost and energy savings. Such district cooling systems have already been deployed in the Marina Bay area and will be rolled out to new districts such as Punggol Digital District and Tengah. Data will be harnessed across the district to enhance facilities management and enable dynamic energy allocation. Vehicle to grid, V2G, is another example. The SP Group announced just such a trial in Singapore earlier this month. If it works, the batteries in electric vehicles can be dual-purposed as storage for the city's electricity grid to improve its reliability and allow it to better utilize intermittent solar power. Thirdly, a smart city builds for the future. Underlying infrastructure like roads and utilities make cities tick. By now, they don't make headlines anymore, but they are still vital to support continued growth, continued economic, social, cultural, and intellectual activity. At the same time, new kinds of infrastructure must be built to allow for transactions and activities in the digital space safely, securely, reliably. What might make up such digital infrastructure? First and foremost, digital identity. In Singapore, we use the National Digital Identity System, or SingPass, that provides identity assurance in transactions with the government and businesses. You can even digitally sign housing rental agreements through SingPass. Second, e-payments. In Singapore, we built PayNow, which is open to all and free to use. You only need to know the recipient's mobile number to make transfers, regardless of which local bank you bank with or he banks with. We also launched a single QR code format for vendors to receive e-payments to minimize confusion while allowing many e-payment solutions to compete and thrive. Third, a cyber-physical platform, such as the open digital platform that we are building for the Punggol Digital District. Think of this as an operating system for a smart district. This will allow for component smart systems to connect and interoperate, and for future applications to be incorporated in a modular manner. Fourth, and not the least important of all, the cellular network. Our 5G standalone network is on track to roll out services very soon. It will not only bring faster speeds and higher reliability, but also enable new possibilities that can improve our quality of life and power the digital economy. In conclusion, please allow me to share a favorite quote of mine by Arthur C. Clarke, author of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And he said, "Any sufficiently sophisticated technology is indistinguishable from magic. That's surely a vision any smart nation can aspire to. Between vision and reality, there is still much to be done. Besides digital infrastructure, we also need a workforce uplifted by digital skills and businesses transformed by digital tools. In the smart cities of the future, we will need a culture that supports the healthy challenging of the status quo. We will need innovators who create new digital solutions and bridge builders who apply them to urban living. They will gather physically and virtually in forums like today's to share views and sharpen each other's thinking. I thank you all for your enthusiastic participation and wish you fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Teo. With that, let us dive right into our speaker sharing for Smarter and Greener, Transforming Through Technology. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our moderator for this session, Ms. Alice Charles, Project Lead for Cities, Infrastructure, and Urban Services at the World Economic Forum. I will now leave the next segment in her capable hands. Ms. Charles, please.
Thank you very much, Genevieve. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. So for the next hour or so, we're going to be spending some time talking through this session on smarter and greener, transforming through technology. We are joined today by some wonderful panelists whom I'd like to formally introduce. So first of all, we have Vice Mayor Yang Zhiping from the city of Suzhou in China. We also have Mr. Chu Men Leong, the President of Urban Solutions from ST Engineering. And we have Professor Carlo Ratti, who's a Professor of Urban Technologies and Planning from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he's also the Director of the Senseable Cities Lab there. And finally, we have Matthias Rebellius, who's the CEO of Smart Infrastructure for Siemens. So technologies like artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things can improve our lives, but also increase vulnerabilities. In this session, we're going to explore how technology is driving change amidst the global threats like COVID-19 that we're currently experiencing, and also climate change, which continues. Also, we're going to explore how government and business can cooperate to help cities thrive in an ever-changing environment. Now what I'd like to do is give each of our panelists an opportunity to share their perspectives in the first instance, and also just a reminder to you, the audience, to please make sure you pop your questions into the Q&A section throughout, so I can indeed ask your questions. So let's first turn to our first speaker this morning, and if I could turn to the Vice Mayor of Suzhou to provide his opening remarks. Vice Mayor, the floor is yours.
好，尊敬的杨部长，各位嘉宾，下午好。我今天
Honorable Minister Teo and ladies and gentlemen. So my topic for today is embracing digitization and building a better city. Suzhou is a place where we have 17 million population, and we have more than 790,000 enterprises with more than 4.5 million cars. And that goes to show that when, of course, we will have problems when we are operating and managing the city. So there are 3 points that I'd like to share with you today. First of all, digitalizing to drive transformation of the companies. Companies are a very important component of cities. And in Suzhou, we have about 160,000 enterprises. And of course, there are traditional ones and there are the modern ones. And to drive that transformation is very important to maintain our core competitiveness. Of course, we actually approach it from 2 points. First of all, we drive focusing at the development of IT, big data and AI and other advanced sector, and to drive the development, it gives us new technology and new solutions. It solves the supply side problem. On the other hand, we also drive existing companies to speed up their digital transformation and to reform their businesses using smart technology. Of course, we have companies like Bosch, J&J, and they are beacon-like companies. The benchmark-like companies. We intend to transform 11,000 companies within 3 years to drive digital transformation of these companies. Secondly, digitalizing to improve planning and development of our city. With improving technological capabilities, we are able to transform the cities into develop a digital base for the companies. And we have an original GIS system, and we are going to integrate it with BIM and CIM to become, the digital base. On the other hand, in planning and developing our city, we also try to integrate the different elements of the city. For example, we have the car parks and also the signal lights and traffic lights, etc. We integrate them together to have traffic solutions, which is digital. And we are also going to organize the 29th ITS World Congress, and we'll be using digital technology to showcase IOV and using V2V and V2X, etc. And in 3 years, we will intend to build more than 200 kilometers of roads for 5G usage. And for the third point, we will be enabling government governance with digitalization. And there are a lot of aspects to it. We will learn from Singapore's experience. We have created something that is facing the people. We call it Suzhou Dao, which means that we are giving a very good services, and which means that it includes services such as different services that try to resolve a lot of the services that are public facing. We also have another, which is a Shu Shangtong, which is something like Suzhou Business Connect. And this is targeted at businesses and provide them with a single access point so that they are able to obtain comprehensive services, government services. We want to learn from different cities and different experiences from different people to ensure that we can build a digital city. Thank you very much. That's all for my sharing.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. It's great to hear how you're using digital solutions to plan and design your city and indeed transform many of the public services that you're offering within your city. So now let's hear the perspective of Professor Carlo Ratti. Carlo, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alice and Dole. I have just, 4 very quick remarks. The first one is what we are discussing is part of the field which is changing very, very fast, very rapidly. And so I wanted to thank, the Center for bringing us together. It's very important to have discussion, to share ideas from different parts of the world. When things are changing so fast, it's really important to come together, share knowledge, and, and learn from each other. So that's just a quick remarks about, the importance of us, all of us being here together. Having said that, the other points for me are quite simple. The first one is we are talking a lot about infrastructure in the United States. As you know, there's a big infrastructure plan, part of it approved, part of it being still discussed. But when we think about infrastructure, too often we think about the physical infrastructure. And it's very important to realize, as the minister just reminded us before, that, if you use digital, we can use physical things better. So somehow we can, solve the city's problem, not necessarily with more concrete or asphalt, but with more silicon, with more digital intelligence. So it's very interesting. Sometimes, with digital intelligence, we can actually get a better bang for the buck. We can spend less and, use better what you already have. That's very important because it can help us to lead to a greener world, because we need, again, less energy to build physical infrastructure. We can just run better start by running better what we already have. And, you know, as it was mentioned before as well, you know, one key example is what we've seen through COVID. You know, most of the successful solutions were combining digital and physical and using digital to be more effective. At the same time, I also think that in the discussion we are going to have over the next 45 minutes, we shouldn't avoid talking about the new risks. There's risks about the digital infrastructure being hacked, the risks about, you know, ownership of data, the risk of control, the widespread usage of, for instance, facial recognition in somebody's infrastructure is a big challenge for cities all over the world. We need to talk about that. So somehow also, you know, my final point is over the next few minutes, let's also reflect not only on how digital can help run our cities in a more efficient way, but also some new threats that actually could happen in our cities tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Carlo. I think you're absolutely right. We are going through rapid change, and there is a need for us all to learn from each other, and hopefully we're able to do a little bit of that today. And thank you for also flagging the fact that digital infrastructure does allow us to use infrastructure in a more smart and efficient way. And now let's hear the perspective of Mr. Chu Men Leong. The floor is yours, Mr. Chu.
Thank you, Alice. Cities today, I think, still offer the most efficient means of organizing societies and, of course, serving up the best economic opportunities. But yet, alongside the benefits of high-density living are some very tangible challenges and externalities: congestion, security threats, pandemic spread, and, of course, intensifying carbon emissions. So amidst these global threats, smart and green technologies are throwing up new opportunities for cities to actually pivot to the new normal of living with pandemics, and also to deliver better quality of life overall, and certainly become more sustainable. I think the upshot is that smart city technologies are showing the way for cities to become more connected, resilient, and sustainable. Now, in terms of connectivity, cities today see an explosion of digital bandwidth, reduced latency and network coverage, all at ever lowering costs of per connection node. IoT sensors are proliferating, fitted into buildings, critical and transportation infrastructure very quickly. And what happened is that a real sort of MRI of what is going on deep inside them are generated. This facilitates predictive maintenance with less disruptions and better system optimization. And riding on the same trend, public transportation efficiency and reliability rises while road congestion comes down. And today in cities, complexities are more readily abstracted down to simple phone applications, whether is it to help you save utilities or provide mobility as a service. Now, in terms of resilience, the new rounds of digitalization and automation actually hasten the pivot to new normals of reduced physical contact while facilitating office return, business and social gathering, and even border reopening. So video sensor networks with data analytics facilitate better observation of safe distancing and creation of effective bubble zones. And today, proliferation of contactless access controls combined with temperature sensing and even vaccination e-certification allow for safer human traffic flow at bigger events and even at immigration clearance. And as mentioned, digital identity management solutions guide the way for more responsive and efficient contact tracing and even logistic distribution in this pandemic times. And finally, robotics and automation are also helping to minimize unnecessary interactions. Now, in terms of sustainability, whole new combinations of connected digital technologies are really driving up utility efficiency. So today, intelligent power grids enable optimal injection of renewable energy. Smart water grids reduce network leakage. And across various buildings, estates, townships, I think utility systems are being fitted with digital measurement optimization solutions to help move towards net zero outcomes. And for transportation, more efficient and affordable options for seamless point-to-point journeys without car ownership are opening up very quickly. So public transportation, shared and autonomous rides facilitated by mobility as a service applications is really going up. Ultimately, public transportation ridership can go up and congestions come down. And you can also see that transportation platforms are going all electric in a big way and within shortened time frames. So in combination, all this will lead to less congestion, lower pollution, and lesser carbon footprint per kilometer travel. So in sum, I think to address global challenges like COVID-19 and climate change, become smarter and greener, as well as enhance the overall quality of life of communities, cities around the world are actually rapidly adopting smart city technologies, solutions that enable societies to move towards a more connected, resilient, and sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chu. I think it was great to hear that intervention around the role of enabling technology in helping cities and, of course, countries around the world to get to net zero, whether that's improving the efficiency of our electricity grid infrastructure to help us with the ultimate objective of decarbonising our grid, or indeed operating our transport systems more effectively. Now let's turn to Mr. Matthias Rebellius from Siemens. Matthias, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Alice, and good day, everyone out there. And it's a real pleasure for me and an honor also to participate here and also contribute as Siemens and also personally to these very important topics that we are talking about here. And it's of course infrastructure and smart infrastructure in cities is you talk a lot about the threats, about the pandemics and also the climate change facing on us. But there's one trend which still remains true also with and after the pandemic, which is urbanization. And we heard it already a couple of times from my colleagues here on the panel before. So before the pandemic, I personally also, took me trips around the globe to all the big cities that came to a little bit of a halt, as you can imagine, these days. And I asked myself, where's still growth? How can this continue looking at all these mega cities? And we all know it will continue. Urbanization is a trend that will come back and will remain, and therefore we have to provide the technologies and also the solutions to it. So if you look into the UN prediction of the population increase to by 2.5 billion additional city people until 2050, this is the equivalent of adding every year one New York City on the planet for the next 30 years. So so every 10 days, one New York City. So that is amazing. And therefore the city already consumes today 80% of the energy and account for 75% of the global CO2 emissions. So that is obvious that the battle against climate change will be won, hopefully, in cities or being decided also in cities. So, and the pandemic further highlighted needs for smarter cities. Over 90% of COVID diseases occur in cities, in urban areas, I must say. So we need new ways to shape urban growth, create sustainable communities, as we call that, to make cities more environmentally friendly and sustainable, and to make infrastructure more adaptable to changing requirements, such as the pandemic and others. I'm optimistic we can do exactly that. By using digital solutions and technologies such as IoT, artificial intelligence, and we will talk about this more today, and we heard it also from Carlo before, we can make our cities more sustainable. Digitalization is the brain, is the enabler to make smart infrastructure also sustainable infrastructure. And that is what I personally believe in, which is very important. So only less than 10% of today's world building are smart. So imagine the potential, but also you see the needs. So we have to work on the technology. We have to work with digital twins to enable, to improve a building's carbon footprint long before the groundbreaking even took place. And the use of IoT sensors and we heard it before also from Chu, is that to monitor buildings' occupancy, airflow, significantly increase energy efficiency, but also the quality of life for the inhabitants. And that's not only impossible in COVID-19 or post-COVID-19 scenarios, but we all talk about the back to work or the new normal. So intelligent, highly connected buildings will form the core for smarter cities. And we do this in a digital ecosystem where we have buildings, power grids connected within smart mobility, also within traffic systems, parking traffic management systems and the like. And as we heard it many times before, also electric vehicles. And that is an infrastructure challenge and an opportunity for all of us. So we can make the city smarter. We can do this together to make a smart community in a smart city. And this is what sustainable communities stand for. It's good for us today, and it's decisive and critical for the next generation. We have the answers today. We need to act. Together, we have an opportunity to make it happen.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and it's great to hear from you, highlighting, of course, that the urbanization trend is going to continue despite COVID-19 and the opportunities around using digital technology to create more sustainable cities and more sustainable buildings. And thank you for flagging the opportunity to use technology to make our building stock so much more efficient. So we're coming to the end of this segment. I guess we have heard from the Minister around smart cities must be resilient. They must embrace an integrated approach to the use of energy and manage our environment. And smart cities must be built for the future. We also have heard from our other speakers examples, for example, in how the city of Suzhou has used technology to better plan and design and operate the services within the city. We've also heard that there are rapid changes in relation to technology, and we must continue to learn from each other. We have heard about the opportunity to do more with less and use our existing infrastructure, physical infrastructure, better if we leverage digital infrastructure. But of course, we've also heard that there is risk associated. So now let's turn to see the results, first of all, of our poll before we start to bring your questions to our panelists. So let's see the results of the poll. So the question was, what is the biggest challenge for mobilizing technologies to drive change today? And the results certainly show us that budget constraints for sustainable use and improvement of technologies are the biggest constraints. Interesting result. I guess it's hardly surprising because city budgets have been so significantly constrained, and indeed national government budgets, by the pandemic. But one of the things I'll try and weave into the conversation as we go forward is just to hear from some of our speakers around, some of the financing models and operating models that can be leveraged to finance critical digital infrastructure. So that's one for Matthias to think about and one for Mr. Chu to think about a little bit later. So I'll come back to you. So first, we had some pre-registered questions. And the first question that we have was directed at the Vice Mayor, but also directed at Mr. Chu. So the question is, how can the government adopt an evolving form of regulatory framework to keep pace with the evolving technologies and the associated potential vulnerabilities? And that came in from Mr. Rajdran, who is from the LSC in Bahrain. So perhaps if I turn first to Vice Mayor, perhaps you'd like to tell us what's your answer to that question.
Indeed, that's a very good question. Generally, regulation does not keep up with the development of technology. That seems to be normal from our perspective. It's very important to firstly improve the legal system. In my country, China, we have data security law, which will be formally implemented in September this year. And previously, we also launched cybersecurity law and the personal information protection law that is in the process for legislation. And in addition to the legal development, we also talk about the green development. We talked about how by changing the regulations, we will then be able to utilize this new type of energy in order to keep up with the development of all these advanced technology. In addition to the improved legal environment, we'd also have to strengthen the industry or supervision. Recently, my government has taken action against quite a number of apps, because these apps were suspected of collecting and using personal information, and these are in violation of laws. So it requires relevant governments and measures to regulate such misbehaviors of these app developers.
We
believe that in face of the development of all these technology, we definitely need to adopt a new approach to tackle these app developers in order to provide personal information and personal data. So that's my brief answer to this question.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Perhaps we could hear from Mr. Chu. What's your perspective?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a very good question. Actually, in response to this particular question, I would actually suggest for cities to think about how they can actually expand the horizons in terms of collaboration with the industry itself, which will provide the smart city solution. And the key point I want to highlight is that I think the city's mental model can change from one of seeing smart city technology providers as vendors to one as long-term strategic partners. And actually, this will involve like allowing the industry to engage the city directly to understand the pain points. Then from there, increase readiness to support resource piloting. And at the same time, consider opening up regulatory sandboxes to prove the application of technology and to prove its potential. And once proven, then work together with industry to move quickly to deployment and scaling. And in fact, there is also one aspect that the cities can consider. That is really co-development of capabilities with the industry in areas which smart city capabilities are deemed a bit more strategic. And a good area that should be considered here is really a citywide operating system platform that facilitate city data collection, trend analysis, demand supply optimization, and of course new levels of city control. And separately, I think to optimize effective collaboration in industry to build smarter and greener cities to the benefits of all, I think cities should consider how to, pivot their procurement framework to enable more agile development, especially in this age of citywide operating system platforms. Also consider how it can encourage the build-up of localized alliances for development of more complex end-to-end systems. A good example, actually application of autonomous vehicle for public transportation. And if the city is also willing to come forward to see how to create clear lead demand, that will actually encourage the industry to further invest. Because if the industry knows that there's a clear commercial pathway, I think they will invest, undertake the technology and operational development risk for the city. And finally, I would say that the city can consider co-owning some of these smart city showcases so that the industry can grow this solution offering proven in this city, outside of the city, and as they go outside of the city, what they learn, what they gather, they can also actually plow back and accrue back to the city, ultimately making the city smarter and greener.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chu. So the second question that came in before the session was, how can technology be inclusive so that all groups of society can benefit from and not be left behind in an increasingly digital world? And that came from HDB in Singapore. And perhaps I could direct that question to the Vice Mayor in the first instance. Any comments?
Indeed, this is also another very good question. As a government service provider, it's very important that we are able to cater or provide the service fairly to various groups in the society. For Suzhou, in our as we build our city into a smart city, we have always abided by this principle. As we work very hard on the online scenario, we also have to provide offline services. For example, as we build up an intelligent community, we actually provided more than 1,800 offline physical kiosks to provide the service. So in other words, our residents, not only are they able to have access to these online services, but they can also approach the physical kiosk to get a service that they require. In addition to that, as we build the interface, we actually we are fully aware of our elderly's needs and those of the group of people who have difficulties in using these digital devices. So we have this specific care mode. What does this care mode do? You will see that the interface, the arrangement of the interface is more senior friendly. The font is also bigger. So with this design, it makes it easier and convenient for our seniors to utilize. So that's what we do.
Not just seniors, some of us use it all the time. So if I could ask Carlo Ratti for his perspective.
Yeah, I think in order to make our technologies more inclusive, one of the crucial things is to use them in a very open and transparent way. It's about data, it's about technology itself. So for instance, a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic, I had the privilege of curating the Shenzhen Biennale in the city of Shenzhen. You know, the Biennale is a great exhibition dealing with urban planning, technology, and so on. And what we did was actually, for the first time, take facial recognition, but create a system where people can decide if they want to be on the system or not on the system, where people would know exactly how the system works, where the data is collected and so on. And the results were very, very interesting. You know, that's usually not how a technological system is used. Usually it's such system often all over the world are used, you know, in a top-down way, more for control and security purposes. But actually, if you put technologies in the hand of the people, they are the best position to decide, you know, how to turn them into tools of inclusiveness.
Thank you very much, Carlo. And now let's hear from Mr. Chu. What do you think?
Well, I would like to actually call out one specific benefit that I think digitalization can bring to cities, which in turn actually benefits society at large. And that's really how digitalization actually enables cities to make very big quantum leaps in connection. Because digitalization actually enables cities to now uncover deeper insights through, of course, extensive data collection and analysis, basically to determine how the city is working and where it's not. And that helps to lay out path to higher efficiency, better performance, and help deliver, I think, a more equitable outcome in terms of uplift in quality of life for citizens. And today, digitalization provides capacity for cities to make sense of the data collected from all forms of infrastructure, buildings, street lighting, car parks, EV charging, transportation systems, and so forth. And through effective data management, AI, and of course, machine learning, I think the level of connection of trends basically going to a whole new level not seen before. And that actually gives new capacity for optimization. When I say optimization, I mean how the city can actually calibrate supply versus fluctuating demand, leading to better savings, provide immediate feedback on consumption, shaping behaviors, help decongest roadways and guide traffic even in disruption. And of course, forecast demand travel demand and optimize, I think, public transport asset deployment. So ultimately, what I'm trying to say is that digitalization gives the city, I think, the ability now to see itself better in the mirror, to know what goes on in and out on a real-time basis, understand its own consumption patterns, its own carbon footprint, and even disease trends. And that creates new options for optimization. And that actually helps the city to change the way it operates and keep up with the changes and challenges, I think, thrown up by the global trends.
Thank you very much. So it very much enables the city to understand how it's currently performing and it can improve that situation. Matthias, would you like to build on that?
Yeah, perhaps there's one topic I want to build on, because my predecessors here mentioned already topics like caring about elderlies, about people with disabilities, and also the right way of using the tools and analytics, not top down, but also make it transparent, so to increase adoption rate. And also, as Chu said, including analytics. So I would just add perhaps two topics here. One is, it has to be human-centric from my perspective. So human-centric about making it focus on that the people see the benefit and that they feel also included in the entire system. That is the personal way, or the how people feel and interact. The second one is more a global view. If you look into that, still 1 out of 3 urban residents still lives in, how should I call it, inadequate areas with inadequate basic services, and that is an issue. Those people don't feel included into anything what is what we call smart cities. So how can we change that? Also, the investments being needed, and relates perhaps a little bit also to the poll before, is counterintuitive to the money and the investments being needed to do this in areas where the money is not necessarily there. I know we talk about this later. But here's also one idea which I would call a leapfrog effect, because those parts of the world, they don't have to care about retrofit and expensive modernization, so they can plan their cities smart by design. And we see this happening around the world more and more. And I want to also fight a little bit against the paradigm that smart technology is always expensive. It can be very much tailored to the needs. And with IoT and cloud-based services, we can have tailor-made solutions which not necessarily be only too expensive. And the financing part will also address the point, and that's I want to close with here, that only 80% of the costs occur in the operations of buildings and cities. And this is where we can save the money. So if you invest smart, you gain more at the end afterwards.
Thank you very much for that. And maybe before we get into the live questions, as you did touch upon the poll results, I give anybody else who would like to tackle this challenge an opportunity to respond. So just a reminder of what our poll question was. What is the biggest challenge for mobilizing technologies to drive change today? And the majority of those who responded said budget constraints for sustainable use and improvement of technologies. Would anyone like to offer some solutions there? I think Carlo has his hand up. Carlo, the floor is yours.
Yes, with pleasure. I was really surprised by the key answer. And the reason is that it's not really about the cost of technology. I mean, we can discuss some technologies that are more expensive, some are less expensive. But, for two reasons I was surprised by the key answer. The first one is when you compare that, even the most expensive digital technologies, when you compare them with the cost of, say, a new highway, new tunnel, a new metro, a new piece of physical infrastructure, that's usually very, very little. The other very important thing is that usually the key thing is not the cost of investment, but is today, there's a gigantic supply of money around the world. The question is, can we actually generate a return? And the interesting thing, as we said during the conversations, is usually digital gives you a better return than physical. In many cases, if you just use digital to optimize something you already have, yes, you have an investment to do, but then, the bang for the buck, the amount of what you get back per dollar invested is usually more. So it should not be very difficult to finance it. And I think, what we are seeing around the world is that that's usually the case. I would be more concerned about some of the other points. I think number 2 was more about data transparency and so on, 28%, if I'm not wrong. And then, I think to me that's one of the key challenges, how we can build really cities where technology can benefit all, where everybody has a grasp and an understanding of technology.
Great, thank you, Carlo. Would anyone else like to pick up on that poll result? I think Mr. Chu wants to come in.
Thanks. I fully agree with what Carlo has actually said. The cost of investment for digitalization is small, very small compared to the cost of the entire physical infrastructure investment that is needed to run and operate the city. And at the end of the day, the investment in digitalization brings the benefit of a much higher level, like I said, cognition of the trends within the city, brings new level of efficiency and lower essentially the overall carbon footprint for the city. And I think that will really make up in terms of the returns on investment or the small investment that is required to drive digitalization within the city.
Great, thank you for that. Anyone else? Any final, Matthias, you want to respond?
Yeah, just to add on this, because I was also surprised as Carlo was, and looking at the result, but isn't that also perhaps not only a budget constraint, but also a question of the buying center? So who makes the buying decision for the investments? If it's related to cities, I think only a portion of it is really being decided by the city themselves, for their own building stock or for public infrastructure. But the huge majority is being privately financed, and there the decision-making process is perhaps a different one. So there is more like turning capex into opex. That's one thing with proven outcome investments and performance contracting, for example, and then also working together with the cities to indirectly enable and influence the buying, the ones who finally make the buying or investment decision. I think that's something which has always been a topic in big cities, from my perspective.
Completely agree. I think, there's so many financing models are being developed for the technological infrastructure that could indeed make their way into the provision of wider physical infrastructure. So now let's take a look at some of the live questions that we've been receiving. So maybe if I turn to the first one we've received from Peter Godfrey. Do you think arts and culture will play a greater or lesser role in the smarter or greener cities of the future? Would anyone like to pick up on that question? Maybe Carlo, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can tell you my wish. My wish is that, I hope that, they will play a bigger role. Now, there's not that many connections with digital tech here. I think the connection I see is perhaps the fact that digital tech can help us to organize things better, concerts, happenings, bring people together in a better way, use the power of networks, leverage the power of networks in order, again, to connect people better. And, that's the beginning for then sharing culture and culture among ourselves. Also, we've seen during the pandemic different ways in which technology can help us to distribute content in a different way. Personally, I was very lucky to have been invited to the Bocelli concert organized by the Jamil Foundation that was broadcast globally, and that was a way to use digital channels during the pandemic to really have a similar experience to the one you would have in a theater. So yes, there's a few instances in which we can leverage the power of networks in order to better share culture. But overall, I think that's not going to happen automatically. If you want it to happen, if that is our wish, then we need to actively try to make it happen. We need to put pressure on politicians. Politicians need to really invest in culture. So I don't think it's going to happen naturally just because of smart technologies.
Thank you, Carlo. Anyone else want to pick that one up? No. So let's move to our next question. So our next question comes from Mr. Gullabry. And what would be the share of emissions from transport as it is now, and when electrification is more significant compared with the use of electricity, whether from fossil fuels or renewable energy? Anyone want to pick that one up? Matthias, Mr. Chu, do you want to
go ahead?
Take a stab? The floor is yours.
Matthias first, yeah.
No, please, Chu.
Okay.
Mr. Chu, the floor is yours.
Yeah, depending on which report you pick up, I think one can see that today transportation takes quite a big share in terms of the global emissions. According to some reports, maybe 14 to 50% of the global CO2 emissions actually come directly from transportation. And I think the point I want to share is that I think if cities actually drive towards a bigger adoption of public transportation, means shared transportation, and in the future, of course, autonomous transportation, then the city will have I think the opportunity to really drive down in terms of the carbon footprint per passenger kilometer travel, because today the public transportation, the shared transportation really provides the lowest carbon footprint for travel as compared to private cars. But even with that, I think cities now have the option to drive towards adoption of electrification, both for, I think, private vehicles as well as public transportation. And if we do it in a way that is, I think, more systematic, which means that addressing the infrastructural challenge, being ensuring that charging infrastructure is actually available so the adoption rate can go up, then the city will also have, again, a better chance of actually reducing its overall transportation carbon footprint in the long run.
Thank you, Mr. Chu.
Yeah.
Matthias.
Yeah, I think that is, of course, a topic close to my heart, because not only because making an all-electric world, as we call it, that is exactly what we're working on. But that makes only sense if the electric power is being generated out of the majority of renewable energy, and we know sources, and we know that's not the case today. Today, 80% of the global energy production comes from fossil fuels and only 20% renewables. We have to turn this upside down to 2080, and then it makes total sense. The train traffic already globally can go into zero emissions. The individual traffic is a big contributor, and the air traffic, of course. So for the air traffic, not yet a solution there, but other than limitation to what's needed. But on the individual traffic, and Chu was referring to that also on, it's not only about the charging infrastructure, but it's also where the power is coming from, and therefore renewable. Turn this to 80-20. So also in every city, every country, I can just encourage to look at this holistically, because electrification of traffic makes only sense if it comes from renewable sources.
Great point. And we know if we're going to get to net zero, we not only need to decarbonize our mobility system, but our electricity grid, for example, and we also need to have action on buildings, creating ultra-efficient buildings, and indeed compact cities. So the next question that I'm going to take, and by the way, just for the audience's understanding, we're picking the questions that were deemed most popular that were submitted by members of the audience. So the next question I'm going to take is, gaining trust from citizens in new technology, particularly those deployed for use in public spaces, is critical. Given that smarter and greener necessarily requires the aggregation of more data, both personal and non-personal, how does the panel think we make sure citizens come with us as we develop these cities and places? And that comes in from Matt Hewitt. Who would like to take that? Maybe Carlo, if I start with you? We can't hear you at the moment. Perhaps we come back to you in just a second. Anyone else like to take that whilst we bring Carlo back? Matthias, maybe?
Yeah, I can try. I think that's an important question. It talks about personal and non-personal data, about the data privacy and cybersecurity is definitely something where it's a foundation of digitalization. So it will not work without. And that because people have to, have also trust in the systems and what is being done with their data. And we have also, and we are committed to this as a company, as the industry, also to deal with this to the utmost diligence, that data is only used for a purpose which makes, supports the goal of what we want to achieve in cities and with, and also for the individuals. So it is. I know it's an important topic. We do everything to have our systems and offerings secured, as well as respect data privacy, and that is, I think, for me, a pillar for the foundation of digitalization of infrastructure and cities.
Great, thank you, Matthias. Carlo?
Yeah, happy to speak. By the way, I couldn't unmute for this kind of standard Zoom glitches sometimes, so I couldn't unmute. That's why I couldn't speak before. But I going back to the question. Well, we touch upon this a little bit before. I think really the more we share technological systems, the more we open them up, the more we allow people to be part of them, the more people will follow. If I understand the question correctly, is really how can we convince people that it's good to share the data? And so I think we got a good example during the pandemic. There the data was used in a transparent way, not for advertising, was used for the public good. And I think we all were very happy to install apps sharing very, very precise and granular location about where we were, who we were meeting, and so on, all the contact tracing apps all over the world. So again, I think that approach, in order to be transparent, to share the value, to see this is not going to be used against you, this information is going to be used to help you and to help society. Then if we do this, I'm convinced that people will follow.
Great, thank you very much. And of course, some cities allocate areas within their city to allow for demonstrations of technology so citizens can understand its application, and the policymakers, the city themselves, can help design policy to allow for acceleration of technologies. Anybody else that would like to comment? Mr. Chu?
Yeah, I think most of the points have been covered, but I just want to highlight that when we go in to build, I think, digital layers for smarter city, it's very important to make sure that they bring along very strong cybersecurity capabilities there. And that actually will ensure, I think, more secure infrastructure, and therefore ensures the security of the data that is collected. And when we are able to give assurance on that point, I think then confidence will certainly rise that the data is securely collected, securely stored, and of course be used essentially for the purposes that it's intended to. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. So first of all, I'd like to thank our esteemed panelists, and indeed the Minister who provided the introduction to this conversation today. And I'd like to thank our wonderful audience who clearly were tuned in as they posed these great questions. I guess I'm going to start with what we heard at the very beginning in terms of trying to summarize this conversation. So we heard from the Minister about smart cities must be resilient and respond and adapt quickly to new challenges. They must be integrated, provide an integrated approach to the use of resources and manage our environment sustainably. And smart cities must be built for the future. And I think they're valuable lessons that we could all, sort of bring to the deployment of technology in our cities around the world. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to pass back to our MC, Genevieve, who's going to close out the session. Genevieve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Yang Zhiping, Professor Carlo Ratti, Mr. Chu Min Leong, Mr. Matthias Rebellius, and Ms. Alice Childs for this insightful discussion. We have come to the end of this session. Playbacks of this session will be available in the virtual platform resource gallery in a few hours, which will be accessible until the end of July. As Minister Teo highlighted in her speech, we are pleased to announce the launch of a partnership for a smart and sustainable future, the China-Singapore-Tianjin Eco-City, a joint publication between the Center for Livable Cities and the Tianjin Eco-City Administrative Committee. Please use the QR code to download our advanced copy, which contains Chapter 1 of the publication. Do look out for the full version, which will be available soon on the CLC website at clc.gov.sg. Do register for upcoming World City Summit webinar sessions, which are happening from now until November. The next session will be Making Sense, Leveraging the Science of City on 2nd September. Before you leave, please use the QR code or link to fill in our feedback form. Until our next session, goodbye.